So Ian, I'd love to ask you about the role of personality assessments in general, in the diversity and inclusion agenda, because it's such an important topic for organisations and something that we at Thomas International are asked for our opinion on quite a lot. So we spend a lot of time and effort in our research and development division focusing on evidencing that our assessments don't have any inherent adverse impact against any kind of protected groups, protected characteristics, and also showing whether using assessments in a talent management program, let's say for selection, can have a positive effect on reducing bias or increasing the diversity of a candidate pool, let's say, from different stages. I'd love to hear about your work and research as a test author of the HBTI and your views on how personality assessments relate to that agenda.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because essentially from the very basis of the HBTI, one of the things we were trying to do was to measure potential. So we wanted to look at the factors that measure potential to be successful at work. And so we considered everything initially. We looked at things like intelligence, which intelligence is a fairly good predictor of success. Experience is a fairly good predictor of success in the same area. Personality is a great predictor of success, so which is why the HBTI measures personality at work. Whereas some of the kind of demographic characteristics of people don't really predict success at all. So if you're looking at age, gender, ethnicity, very limited to no evidence that there's any relation to potential. So from a scientific perspective, what we really want to do is make sure we're measuring the specific traits, behaviors that relate to performance. So that kind of has the almost, not unintended consequence, but the actual consequence of eliminating discrimination based on characteristics that aren't related to performance or potential at work. So we did find with the HBTI no gender differences on any of the traits, really. So what that says is if we're looking at people's potential based on their personality, we're looking at their actual potential to succeed at work, but we're not introducing any sort of bias into the process for these kind of groups we're talking about.
Do you think that's quite common? Because I find that even from my own education, lots of the older personality assessments sometimes did demonstrate adverse impacts or sometimes quite large gender differences, especially perhaps some of the older intelligence assessments, older personality assessments. Did you look at some of those tools when you were actually constructing the HBTI, and did it inform the reason why you wanted to make sure it wasn't present in your tool? Yeah,
we did, and there's a whole bunch of different explanations for the reasons behind those. Some of them are maybe generational or kind of age differences, just because the tests that were built a while ago do find significant gender biases. But the good thing about the HBTI is we're asking really specific personality questions about the workplace. So our research has been on working professionals who have experience in work, and they've all been tested within the last 10 years. So under those circumstances, using this test, we don't find gender differences. So I think that's a huge improvement, really, in the science of eliminating the bias that has no relationship to people's performance at work.
And it helps us from an applied point of view, because businesses may say, well, I'm using personality assessments, I'm using assessments, and I'm not seeing a huge progression in my diversity and inclusion agenda. So what's happening? And one of the typical things that we tend to experience is that how people describe male and female behaviours and success can be influenced by biases and stereotypes. And we tend to find that it's a bit more down at the applied level at the type of language people are using to describe success. So you may have an individual who has low adjustment and becomes extremely emotional in a meeting. You may see people describing a man becoming very emotional in a meeting as really showing his passion for that particular topic, whereas they may describe a woman as having lost composure. Now, they're showing exactly the same behaviours, possibly from exactly the same level of personality trait, but how their behaviour is described is different. If we're able to show that the assessments don't have any intrinsic biases, it allows us as applied consultants to focus on the practical materials and methods and processes businesses are using to actually realise the value they're getting from those assessments. So challenging the diversity and inclusion and increasing it in businesses is always going to be quite a long game. I personally think that using psychometrics is a great contributor to that effort.
It is, because it's a great way to eliminate the unconscious biases, right? So the reality is most people, when they're being interviewed for a job or being selected for a job, have the kind of classic face-to-face interview, one-on-one. And generally that tends to kind of encourage implicitly the unconscious bias. But when you use better methods for selecting people based on their actual potential to succeed, then that's a really good way of eliminating the unconscious biases that people may or may not be doing intentionally. It may not be malicious, it's just kind of a natural tendency. So that's why the testing and the assessments really help make better, more informed decision making based on evidence, and that we can quantifiably confirm.